I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.
Hello, and welcome. George Orwell's 1984. It's one of the first few novels that truly scared me as a child, and still resonates with me till this day. There were so many things in the book, the words, the imagery, that affected me. Some lines like, perhaps one did not want to be loved, so much as to be understood. And that particular line, it changed my perspective entirely when I was younger. And it illustrated to me that the way that I experienced the world was quite different to other people because of my upbringing and my early experiences, and that there was a lack of understanding between myself and other people. And I realized I had to find a way to bridge that gap if I wanted to progress in life. Call it moments of clarity. I mean, you ever sat in a room alone and feel like you just got struck by a bolt of lightning? I mean, that's how I felt reading 1984. It was like someone just revealed a very private secret with me, and I couldn't unsee the truth. Now, I saw it as a calling for individuals to exercise critical, independent thought. And I saw it as a warning against the dangers of groupthink, and that a man has to be aware of the very real risks, and also the potential dangers, and also the potential long-term ramifications. But that man also has an obligation to preserve his individual liberty and to critically examine and question the narrative. Now, Orwell, he set 1984 in a dystopian future, with the world it's run by three totalitarian states, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, who are at war, or supposedly at war with one another. And the populations, they're kept under strict surveillance with technology, and their every movement, their every word is tracked and recorded, and where the party's truth is the only truth, and any dissent is termed thought crime, and is punishable by torture or death. And the novel's protagonist, Winston Smith, he's a citizen of Oceania, which is ruled by an oligarchy known as INGSOC, or the Party. Winston, he's employed in the records department of the Ministry of Truth, which handles all the party propaganda and all the publications. Now, his job is to rewrite or destroy current and historical documents and literature. It's called the memory hole, where the truth is erased and then replaced, thus ensuring the party's version of the past is never brought into question. The ideal set up by the party was something huge, terrible, and glittering. A nation of warriors and fanatics, all thinking the same thoughts and shouting the same slogans, perpetually working, fighting, persecuting. 300 million people, all with the same face. Winston, he questions the narrative. He questions the ideology of the party, because he believes that the past cannot be rewritten. And he longs for privacy, for intimacy, for freedom. But he knows the punishment for expressing these desires is death. Now he and others, they're bombarded with propaganda about the enemy. Yeah, but the enemy that they're supposedly at war with, Eurasia. The people scream with rage at the images broadcasted on the screens, proudly displaying their loyalty to the party. Now, of course, the very act of not displaying rabid loyalty would be grounds for interrogation and torture. But one day, a woman named Julia, she slips Winston a note with the words, "I love you." So they both begin to meet in secret, but they're eventually discovered by Big Brother. And Winston is brought in and interrogated, as their actions are against party policy. And this is the most terrifying part of the book. It's where Winston is tortured by O'Brien, the chief interrogator. And O'Brien, he asks Winston, "Has it ever occurred to you, Winston, that by the year 2050, at the very latest, no human being will even understand the conversation we are having now? The whole climate of thought will be different, because there will be no thought. Orthodoxy means not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness." And in Oceania, the elite, they control the narrative. They control the information, the figures, the statistics. And if they want to create the illusion of danger, they can, because their truth is the only truth. There's no room for critical discussion. And they can restrict your freedoms, your movements, and they have seemingly endless powers to invade your privacy, all of which is justified by the established threat. A threat that they can scale up or down any time they decide. Global tyranny in the blink of an eye, with no opposition. The populace, they simply applaud and cheer louder like seals, clapping on their own demise. It was not the man's brain that was speaking, it was his larynx. The stuff that was coming out of him was not words. It was just a noise uttered in unconsciousness, like the quacking of a duck. A soldier marches a man to his death. The other pulls the trigger. A clerk, he conceals the truth, or someone informs on their neighbour for not adhering to an enforced social mandate. Or a person is too scared to walk out of their front door or to speak the truth. They're either too scared to act or just simply justify their actions. I was just following orders. But everyone plays a role. Everyone has a hand in their own oppression. And awareness, it comes far too late, if at all. If thought corrupts language, Winston, language can also corrupt thought. And people, they're separated from one another in Oceania, except in designated areas where they're monitored heavily. And because of this distance, the people, they can't congregate to discuss or share ideas and beliefs. They can't touch or show physical affection. They can't protest as they're isolated, they're cut off. And all avenues in which to share information have been censored and erased. If you speak to another person, they and the people around you listen to your every word, testing you to see where your solidarity lies, to gauge your loyalty. And the population, they've adopted the language of the party. It's referred to as newspeak, where certain words have either been eliminated or replaced, as those words are deemed hateful or harmful. Don't you see, Winston, that the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. The party and the people, they engage in the propaganda of doublethink. Doublethink, that's to know and to not know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions and knowing them to be contradictory, yet believing in both of them, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy is impossible, and yet the party is the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to consciously induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you have just performed. You see, Winston, power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. And if both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? Because censorship is control of words, it's control of thoughts. And words and thoughts are now hate, if uttered from the mouths of men, and if they go against the established narrative, even if they're the truth. And hate is now a crime, and words are hate crimes, and hate is violence, and truth is now violence. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Yet as Winston states, real freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 makes 4. And if that is granted, all else follows. In 1984, the people, they're dependent on the system. It's like a social credit system. And if you go against the status quo, you get locked out. You can't transact. You can't purchase what you need. Your rations are restricted. You lose privileges normally afforded to you. And you can't travel. And there is no property or individual assets. So each man is an island unto himself. The choice for mankind lies between freedom and happiness, Winston. And for the great bulk of mankind, happiness is better. And control of the populace is now centralized. A global technocracy has been established where there is no escape. We do not merely destroy our enemies, Winston. We change them. And O'Brien states that a society in which things are evenly distributed to the masses, where small privileged elite rule, would not be stable for very long, and would soon lead to corruption, as those who are normally stupefied by poverty would have the chance to think, and soon realize that the privileged minority had no function, and then do away with the elite by force, and then the cycle would only continue. A hierarchical society, Winston, is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. And Winston and the woman he meets, Julia, they meet in private, out of view of Big Brother, but the entire time they're actually being spied on. Every move they make, every word is being collated on camera to be used as evidence against them and against each other at a later date. But they're both very similar in their opinions and in their questioning of the status quo. And they both take huge risks by being together, by engaging in sex and in the sharing of thoughts. And she rebels against the party by having sex with many men. Winston, he appreciates and is aroused by this act of rebellion, but not of the act of sex itself. He in fact feels disgust towards her promiscuity, but it's the statement of freedom, the act of defiance, that arouses him. He later tells her with real disappointment that you're only a rebel from the waist downwards. And Julia, she works for the anti-sex league that promotes party propaganda. And when Winston first sees Julia, prior to her passing him the note that read, "I love you," he thought she was a member of the thought police, spying on him. And his first thought towards her were of raping and killing her, to fulfill his sexual needs and to kill her as a statement of defiance against Big Brother. He didn't seem to have any real intention of acting on the impulse, but the thought excited him. A free, uncensored thought, violent, primitive, real. And Julia, her love towards Winston, it wasn't sexual or romantic. She said she saw something in his face, and she knew he wasn't like the rest of them, and she was attracted to his spirit of defiance. And Winston had questions, he had suspicions about the party's motivations, and he initially suspected that they wanted to suppress sex to deny the people pleasure and intimacy. And Julia states that the suppression of sex was merely a means of keeping the people divided, of keeping them pent up, on edge, never relaxed, and just full of energy, marching up and down and waving the flag, and shouting the slogans of Big Brother. She says all of this is just simply sex gone sour. You cannot have pure love or pure lust nowadays, Winston. No emotion is pure, because everything is now mixed up with fear and hatred. Winston, he collects old newspaper clippings that prove the party was deliberately lying and misleading the public, and he writes frenetically in his secret diary, connecting the dots. He takes a very philosophical and methodical approach, and the truth, it's the most important thing to Winston. And Julia says she's willing to take risks, but not for old bits of newspaper. So her needs are now, in the moment, they have to be tangible. But Winston, he wants to tear it all down and show the world the ugly truth. Because for him, there was truth and there was untruths. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad. And Winston, he needed to understand. And he came to see that others stayed sane by not understanding. That they simply swallowed everything. And what they swallowed did them no harm, because it left no residue behind. Just as a grain of corn will pass undigested through the body of a bird. So every violation of individual rights, every violation of privacy, of freedoms, is seen as independent of the other because of this lack of understanding. So there is no reflection. There's no comparisons drawn. So each step is framed as essential for the greater good. After all, you have nothing to hide, right? Or do you? Every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every opinion and belief reshaped. And the process, it's continuing day by day, minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. And every party member, Winston, should be an ignorant fanatic whose prevailing mood should be fear, hatred, adulation, and orgiastic triumph. He should have the mentality appropriate to the state of war. It doesn't matter whether the war is actually happening, since no victory is possible. All that is needed is that a state of war should exist. In Oceania, the bonds are severed between people and the past. We have cut the links between child and parent, between man and man, between man and woman. No one dares to trust any longer. In the future, there will be no friends. There will be no art, no literature, no science. There will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of life. The old civilizations claimed that they were founded on love or justice. Ours is founded upon hatred. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face, forever. And with this statement, O'Brien, he's conveying to Winston the ultimate truth. And it's one that shatters Winston. It's that the party needs resistance. They need enemies of the state to rise up against them. Their existence, it depends on it. And the party needs to be seen as acting for the greater good by stamping out these enemies. Their power needs to be witnessed. And there needs to be very real and imagined threats. And there needs to be compliance. And if there are no enemies of the state, well, the party will just create them. Because they have all the tools they need to make that happen. They control language. They control the means of communication. They control the narrative. This subset of society over here, these few speaking out, they're spreading hate with words. They're encouraging and enabling violence. They're toxic and dangerous. They're a threat. They need to be silenced for the betterment of all society. And then when they're done with that threat, they simply replace it with another. And O'Brien, he states, the command of the old despots was, "Thou shalt not." The command of the totalitarians was, "Thou shalt." Our command as thou art. Because Winston, he realized now fully that the battle was just as much external as internal. You know, that if you can feel that staying human is worthwhile, even when it can't have any result whatsoever, you've beaten them. But the torture that Winston is subjected to in room 101, it breaks him physically. And Julia, she also turns on him and betrays him, as he does her, as they were both broken under torture. And the party caused them not only to betray one another, but also their beliefs and convictions. They broke the body to take control of the mind. And Winston, he now realizes that the party can change an individual, just as they can change the past and alter the truth. After all, 2 + 2 = 5, which is what Winston, at the end of the book, writes in dust on a table. And Winston, early on in the book, he notes in his diary that he understands the how, but he does not understand the why. And Winston knows he can't alter anything within his lifetime, but he hopes to leave something behind, some memory or a small record of what he's done, so his life has meaning, that may inspire others someday to act and rise up. And Winston, he states to Julia, I hate purity. I hate goodness. I want everyone to be corrupt to their bones. And he says this with real relish, because he wants to feel, he wants to experience, he wants to have the freedom to express himself, to act, to indulge, to question critically, and to shout from the rooftops that 2 + 2 = 4. And George Orwell, he wrote that the farther a society drifts away from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it, and that speaking the truth in times of deceit is a revolutionary act. And he also said that in order to see what is in front of one's nose needs to be a constant struggle. Or as a very wise Vietnam veteran once said to me, if you are not questioning and critical of your governments and institutions, and just accept the status quo, when you can see things are going wrong, and you know things are not working, then you are failing the basic fundamental obligations of citizenship. And words can make a difference. And the enemy of truth is, and always will be, blind acceptance.